right. Good morning, everybody. How are you all doing today? Just checking in first. Let me know if you can hear me okay, please. All right. Thank you all. I appreciate it. So we'll go ahead and we'll get started. We will begin with joining palms. And you can repeat after me. I take refuge in the Buddha. I take refuge in the Dharma. I take refuge in the Sangha. And keeping the palms joined. All right. And putting the palms down. Good morning, everybody. Thanks for being here. I always like to start with a question just to give us a little time to get settled before we start the meditation practice. Allows you to communicate a little bit and also, like I said, give some time for others to jump on who'll be joining us. So I think the question I have for you today, and if you're new to YouTube, there's a chat box on your screen. You'll be able to respond there. Just feel free to type in. I think the question I have today, actually, it's funny. I'll just read. You can't really see my setup here. It's very fancy. I have a cardboard box. But on the front, there's something I was sent from a group I work with. And it's a quote by Anne Frank. And it says, "How wonderful it is that nobody need wait a single moment before starting to improve the world." I'll read that one more time. How wonderful it is that nobody need wait a single moment before starting to improve the world. From Anne Frank. And I think we'll start with looking at this Anne Frank quote. And my question to you all is, what keeps you from? Let's not look at changing the world right now. That's a grand task. But what keeps you from changing yourself? When we look at meditation, Buddhist practice, a lot of it is really about exploring your own ways of being. And then from there, working on changing your karma, meaning your actions. Karma not being what you get, karma being what you give. So we have to explore ourselves, our body, our speech, our mind, what we bring into the world. And with practice, meditation, looking at the Buddhist teachings, begin to explore how do we change these things. So when we look at this Anne Frank quote, where she's talking, and again, I'll read it one more time before I finalize the question. How wonderful it is that nobody need wait a single moment before starting to improve the world. So I ask all of you, what keeps you from making the changes in your life that would change your world? And I'm a big fan of changing the world. But I'm a bigger fan of changing the self first, because if we don't work on changing ourselves, we're going to have a very difficult time changing everyone around us. So the question, very simply again, is what keeps you from making changes in your own life? And I'll go ahead and type that in here. What keeps you from making changes in your own life? Very simple question. Not very simple answers. They are ones that require us to really deeply explore how and why we do what we do. But what does keep you? We make a lot of excuses. I think it's one of these human elements we have that we can, well, I'll speak for myself. I could come up with an excuse for anything. I'm very good at that. And this journey for me, these last 18 years, has been a lot with cutting through the excuses and no longer making excuses. Being honest with why I can or can't do something, being honest with what hinders me from settling in a certain way. So, but often the excuses are endless. The justifications are endless. That's funny. I see Adam's first response: justifications and excuses. A lot of the justification and excuses, I think, come from not wanting to be wrong, or not wanting to admit that we've maybe failed at something. Lots of them. So that's the question for you to explore. I'll read through some of the responses here, and we'll take just a couple more minutes for you to share before we start the meditation practice. So Adam, justifications and excuses. I mean, 2 words, but those words for me as well, that sums it up. Bill, conditioning is the bottom line. I'm making changes, but they are slow. Absolutely. The awareness is key, and that's, I think, the beautiful part. We have to, as I said earlier, we have to be aware of what we need to change in order to make the change. Molly, avoiding negative feelings about myself, which makes it harder to start the process of change. Definitely. None of us really, I think, well, I can't speak for anyone, but it's not really an enjoyable process to look at the negative feelings or views we have about ourselves. It's not fun. For me, it wasn't fun to wake up every day when I started this path and say to myself, Jeff, you are incredibly greedy. That wasn't fun. It wasn't fun to say to myself, Jeff, you are incredibly angry. That wasn't fun at all. And it wasn't fun to say, Jeff, you're incredibly ignorant, because for my entire life, I prided myself on thinking that I was wise and doing the right thing. So to call ourselves out on our own greed, our own anger, and our own ignorance is not fun, but absolutely required. Bridget, simply fear, expanding on that fear of losing certain relationships and crutches. Yeah, fear is a huge hindrance in the path to awakening. And the Heart Sutra talks about moving beyond fear, beyond expectations. So big challenge. Marisa, the list of what I want change sometimes feels too big and overwhelming. Yeah, definitely. I mean, we could probably spend an hour on just writing a list of things you want to change. And I think for me, when it seems so overwhelming and so daunting, just small doses, look at 1 or 2 things, work on those. Because very often, a lot of the things that we want to change about ourselves, they're really tied together. So there may have been a lot of things that I didn't like about myself that were tied to the emotion of anger. So instead of looking at the 17 things that were tied to anger, I just had to work on how can I cut through anger. And then it took care of 17 things that were tied to anger. So a lot of times we can kind of distill the list down to a few things to maybe make it simple or simpler. Dave, myself is the only thing that keeps me from changing myself or my own life. Definitely. I mean, we get in our way all the time. It's just constant. And thus, Dave, as you know, the beautiful path in the Buddhist teachings is to go beyond the sense of self, and therefore there's no self to get in the way of self. So good luck with that one. Benton, it's our big ego, in quotes, big. Yeah, definitely. Big ego, small ego, just ego. But our egos are huge very often and definitely get in the way. All right, a couple more here I'll share. Anne, it's hard. I have the intention many times, not the follow through. Yeah, I mean, you've heard me talk about this before, but the intention is where it starts. So hold that intention as you do, and with the practice and diligence, eventually you will follow through. Samir, worrying about others' opinions and judgments of others, definitely. I've found it very helpful on this path to no longer care at all about what others think about me. It doesn't mean that that gives you free reins to just treat people poorly, but focus on the practice, the cultivation of wisdom and compassion. And I like to look at it as I stay in my own lane and try not to look in other lanes and try not to care about what others are looking at in my lane. Our last one here, Laurel, clinging to the past and avoiding the present moment because of fear, discomfort. For sure. I mean, none of us like to abide in fear and discomfort. And kind of what I spoke about earlier, that once you begin to recognize your own greed, anger, and ignorance, that can be very uncomfortable. And that's the importance of community, the importance of Sangha. For me, it was very refreshing to spend time around others who were also looking at their own levels of greed, anger, and ignorance, but without judgment. I'm not a fan of this kind of almost this like pretending that everything is fine. I call it the namaste face, where everybody comes into Buddhist places, yoga places, spiritual places, and they kind of join palms and they're like namaste, and they just pretend that everything is wonderful. And it's just not real. If you're angry and pissed off, then be in that and know what that's like. I think being very real with that's important. So only when you can be with your anger or whatever the emotion may be and realize that that's part of your spiritual journey, then you can learn to be comfortable in it. So if we embrace comfort in discomfort, then we can work through it, if that makes sense. So, all right, with that, we'll start the meditation practice. Those who are joining us for the first time, again, welcome. There's a couple things I'll tell you before we begin. Nothing's going to happen to you. All right. You're not going to float away. You won't have any mystical, magical experiences. The mind that races all day long is not going to shut off. Don't judge your practice. Meaning, don't ask yourself, is this working or not working? Am I doing it right or wrong? We're just going to sit. We're going to breathe. Okay. You'll hear sounds inside the room, sounds outside. This is life. Life is filled with chaos. And the practice is learning to get quiet and still within all the chaos. So don't expect anything from this. That's very important as well. If you sit there waiting for some grand aha moments or deep realizations, you'll probably be pretty disappointed. So we're just going to sit and we're going to breathe. Posture, you just want to be comfortable. If you're on a cushion, it helps slide into the front third, pushing the stomach forward. Allows the back to straighten. Shoulders are relaxed. Hands can be on the knees or in the lap, whatever's comfortable. Mouth will be open or closed, whatever's comfortable for you. I will guide us as we begin, and we will settle into a little bit of silence. And starting with the eyes closed if comfortable, or slightly open. Mouth is open or closed. We'll start with taking 3 deep breaths, slowly. And eventually, you'll settle into a natural rhythm of the breath. Knowing throughout the practice, you'll hear sounds. These are not distractions, not disruptions, simply what's happening around us as we sit. Noticing the mind as it wanders, jumping from thought to thought. Start with gently guiding the attention and focus to the stomach or chest. Breathing in, feel them rise. Breathing out, they fall. Simply continue this practice, observing sensation of breath. Expecting nothing but to sit and breathe. And as the mind wanders, lost in thought, recognize it, release that thought, return attention, focus to the breath. Breathing in, follow breath in. Breathing out, follow breath out. Where's your mind? Lost in thought. Return to breath. Letting go of expectations. Letting go of judgment from the practice. Just sitting, breathing. keeping the mind alert, aware of each sound, each thought, each physical sensation, yet concerned with nothing but sitting, breathing. And with the body still, rested, and the speech quiet, aware of all sounds, and the mind learning to settle, know what it's like to just sit and breathe, knowing with each breath there's nothing else to do, nowhere else to go, no one else to be. Everything beautiful, exactly as it is, sitting, breathing. And once again, taking 3 deep breaths slowly, And as you slowly open the eyes, slowly begin to move. Most important with the practice of meditation is to recognize how you feel now, immediately after. Compare this to how you typically feel throughout your day. Recognize the difference, if there is one. Ask yourselves how you prefer to feel every day for the rest of your life. And realize however you feel now, if it's quiet, calm, and still, or a busy mind, racing mind, whatever you're sitting with at this moment, has nothing to do with anything I said. It's nothing to do with how we sit and hold the hands or cross the legs. It's nothing to do with the sounds around us or anything else for that matter. It has everything to do with your own mind and your own mind's reaction to an external condition. This is what the Buddha called pratitya samuppada, means dependent origination. This is the basis of the Buddha's awakening. The word Buddha simply means awakened. He was no different than any one of us. He began to understand the causal relationship of all phenomena. And what that means very simply is every moment of our lives, things happen. We react. More stuff happens, more reactions. That's it. All we're working on is closing the gap to where the way you feel now is closer to how you feel always. Just as driven, motivated, productive, successful, whatever that means to you in your respective lives. But with a mind that's steady, clear, and focused. Distracted by nothing, disturbed by no one. Any sort of feelings of anger, sadness, stress, anxiety, depression, these come from our thoughts. Learning to be with them is very important. Allowing the mind to settle and understanding that these emotions are temporary, they come and go. This practice is not necessarily easy. Meditation is not necessarily fun. It's not an escape. It's learning to be with things as they are. It is direct perception into the present moment. And very often that present moment is incredibly challenging and difficult. So what we practice, as I was speaking about at the beginning, is learning to be in each moment as it arises, recognizing the role we play, the dynamic we have, the words we choose, and how we show up for each moment. As I shared the Anne Frank quote at the beginning, how wonderful it is that nobody need wait a single moment before starting to improve the world. And again, the question is, what are we waiting for to improve our individual world? What are we waiting for to make our lives a little more peaceful, a little more happy, a little more settled, a little more content? What are we waiting for to cut into all of these cravings and desires and wants and needs that we think are going to bring us happiness? We have everything we need and every ability right now to make change in our lives. But it takes work, it takes effort. For me, that's part of the joy of building community, is to be around others who are working on similar things. To be able to recognize your own greed, anger, and ignorance is a start. To cultivate generosity, compassion, and wisdom is the practice. Meditation is free, Buddhist practice is free. Sitting, breathing, and learning to be kind to yourself and everybody else. So with that being said, I always like to use the remaining time to turn it over to you all for questions. I much prefer to respond to what's on your mind. than ramble on my own. So at least I can use your questions to ramble. So again, if you're joining us for the first time, welcome. There's a chat box there somewhere on your screen. Feel free to type in a question, anything with regards to meditation, Buddhist practice, and I'll respond. And we use the rest of the time for that. So the question, what's a good book to read after Lotus in the Stream? So my two recommendations always for books are Lotus in the Stream, which is the first one. And then I always suggest reading, and I'm a Zen practitioner, so a little biased here, but I always suggest reading Zen Mind, Beginner Mind by Shunryu Suzuki. Shunryu Suzuki was a Japanese Zen priest. He came to the States in 40s, 50s, and actually I think the 50s, and built the San Francisco Zen Center. And what I love about his teachings are many things, but one is he is brilliant, I believe, at making these teachings accessible to a Western audience. You know, he turned his back on a very traditional Japanese community to engage the Western community and bring these beautiful teachings to an audience that was really brand new to it. So I love that approach by him. I also love the book itself, Zen Mind, Beginner Mind, because for me, it resonates on many levels, but very specifically, all the crap that's in our head, all the fears, all the worries, all the past, all the concerns, all the anxieties, all the sadness, all this stuff that our mind is filled with. For me, the Zen practice cuts through all of that. The beginner's mind is really about embracing each moment as it arises and not carrying all the baggage that we have with us into each moment. I mean, that's a couple quick thoughts on the book, but Zen Mind, Beginner Mind, which of course we carry at Buddha For You. So if you go on the Buddha For You website, just go to books, you'll see it there if you need it. So the store itself is closed, but online you can get everything there. So that's my suggestion as a next step. Marley, would you please ramble for a bit on how to best deal with very loud noises like a drill or a saw when meditating? Yes. It's funny because there's a couple things here, but if you remember when we were doing construction at the temple a while ago, you know, and it was all volunteer labor and folks in the community building stuff downstairs. And so we were on their schedule. I wasn't going to tell volunteers who were taking their Saturday morning to come help us build something that they needed to wait while we did meditation. So we used it as a form of practice. And what I positioned or kind of presented to everybody was, look, the people here who are working and drilling and hammering and making this noise, they're doing it so we can have a better space. And while it was still to many that frustrating sound, when I presented it as people that we know and love in the community and people that were doing things to make things better for those of us who are sitting here right now, it was received a little bit better. Now, all of a sudden, it's the neighbor doing that. And we don't like that because the neighbor's not doing anything for us. So we tend to like sounds, and I'm going to give a different approach on this in a minute, but we tend to like sounds potentially that are benefiting us. But when it's for somebody else, we think, well, they're ruining my meditation. And this leads me to really my second point, why I laughed initially, is there's very few videos of Shunryu Suzuki teaching. But there's one, and I could post the link or send it to you, where he's talking about the difference between noise and sound and birds chirping. So there's sound and there's noise. Sounds are just what's happening. Noise has this connotation of something negative. So if there's a waterfall outside, if there's birds chirping, right? If there's laughter, if there's beautiful sounds around us, we're okay with that. But the sounds of noises or the sounds of a drill or a saw, like you said, we don't like those sounds. And so we put heavy label and meaning on these sounds. They're all just sounds. We hear birds chirping in a waterfall the same way we hear a saw or a drill. But we create a story in our head that says we like this and we don't like this. And therefore we choose to like and dislike certain things. This is duality. This is the heart of Buddhist teachings. we like certain people. We don't like others. We like certain foods. We don't like others. We like certain sounds. We don't like others. We like certain clothes. We don't like others. We like certain smells. We don't like others. Our entire life is spent judging and labeling things we like and dislike. Excuse me. So I welcome sounds, phones ringing, drills, saws, all of these things that occur we think are ruining our meditation. They're not ruining your meditation. You are ruining your meditation. These are things that are happening around us. I used to always joke and say, how dare we sit silently while they're trying to drill something into the wall downstairs. I hope our silence doesn't disturb their noise. So nothing disturbs meditation except you. So there's my ramble, Marley. Bridget, can you expand upon the concept of dependent origination? Yes. So I always say at the end of meditation, pratitya samupata, dependent origination, the basis of the Buddha's awakening, that everything is contingent upon something else for its existence. So I like to use the example of a chair. So we come up, we sit on a chair, and it provides us use. And we tend to make this very direct one-to-one connection to the chair. I'm glad this chair is here because it gives me something to sit on. And we tend to leave it at that. Now, what we don't always look at is, let's say it's a wooden chair, for example. We don't think about, well, where did the chair come from? It came from a tree. Tree comes from the earth. You have the sun, the water, right? You have the person who labored to make the tree. You have the family potentially or the individuals that work supported, right? Not that I'm a fan of chopping down trees. It's just an example. But there's a lot of things that went into play for us to have these chairs to sit on. But we, with our ego and our kind of narrow lens and our very selfish views, we tend to think only about the relationship it has to us. Dependent origination is understanding the causal relationship of all phenomena, the interconnectedness of all things. It's not all things are one. The chair is separate from the person, which is separate from the tree, which is separate from us. They're all separate entities, but they're all interconnected. They're all contingent upon each other for its existence. So now think about us. When you wake up every day, my master, she taught me that every year on her birthday, she celebrates her mother. That her mother is the one who went through physical pain on that day to bring her into the world and joy and all the beauty that comes with it. But do we stop and recognize that we ourselves are contingent upon everyone around us to exist? From the food we eat, to the clothes we wear, to the family that brought us into life, all of these things. Or do we just get lost in our own little world and say, me, 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 me? So I tend to look at dependent origination as a practice of cutting through ego, cutting through sense of self, cutting through this idea that I am more important than others, and cutting through this idea that I'm separate from others. Causal relationship of all phenomena. You can, really as a practice, try to look at something or someone and just recognize that there are endless trillions and trillions of causes and conditions that went into effect for that instance to occur. And that's where, again, coming back to the beginner's mind is so beautiful because it allows us to be aware of all of the things that have occurred for this moment to take place. But at the same time, this place has never occurred before. So it's beautiful and magical as it is. We don't have to understand everything to appreciate everything. But I find it very useful in appreciating everything to understand that so many things had to occur for us to be in this moment. So I hope that's helpful. Bridget, it's a good question. Other thoughts, questions? Thank you, Vicky. Yes, great book. Samir, so on Tuesday, we discussed the Buddha's diet. Can you share a few thoughts about the Buddha's son? Yeah, so how I can sum this up. So a lot of people don't even realize that the Buddha had a child. And Samir, I don't want you getting any ideas from this. So best way to sum this up is, for those who don't know, the Buddha was a prince. He lived in India 500 years before Christ, 2,500 years ago. As a prince, he was spoiled, had all the wealth, all the riches, everything you can imagine. 29 years old, he was married, he had a child. And at 29 years old, he snuck out. I'm going to give you the very brief 60-second version of the life story of the Buddha before I talk about the son part. But I think to put in context, this is important. 29 years old, he snuck out with his buddy, and he saw for the first time what's called the four sights. He saw old age, he saw sickness, he saw death, and he saw an ascetic, a very simple, wise human, like a monk or a nun. And he would come back, and when he was born, it was said that he would either become a great king like his father, or he would become like a sage. And the father wanted him, of course, to be a king. So they sheltered him. They didn't allow him to see old age or sickness or death or anything like these. They knew that Siddhartha had such a beautiful heart that if he saw suffering, he would not want to continue to grow into the life of a king and run that world. So when he snuck out at 29, he saw these things, and he came back and he basically said, how can I live the life as a prince and life as a king when there's a whole world out there that's suffering? So he, in the middle of the night, he kissed his wife and child goodbye, and he left. And this is where it's always this, controversial topic, because the Buddha left his wife, he left his child at 29 years old. Now, that's really frowned upon. That's why I joke with you, Samir, about don't get any ideas. Stay with your wife and children, please. But that's actually what happened. And the name that they gave this child when he was born was Rahula, means a fetter, like an impediment, like an attachment. Again, also, when you hear these things, especially if you're a parent, it sounds like gut-wrenching. Like, why would I look at my child as an impediment to something? And what I believe, was trying to express is that we have these attachments in our lives. And this doesn't mean that you need to get rid of children, right? We have these attachments in our lives that really make it difficult for us, but at the same time, in a very practical sense, make it the beauty of practice. That it's really hard for us to overcome these attachments. To be a parent and love a child without attaching to them is a very difficult task. To understand that they're going to grow up and carve their own path in their own way is very difficult for parents to do. So I believe that's what the Buddha was referencing with the name, is that he understood that now that he has a child, that's, a wife and a child, that's as attached as one can be. And so this was going to be very difficult for him to practice moving beyond craving, beyond desire, and beyond attachment. So he leaves home at 29. He roams for 6 years, the base of the Himalayan mountains. He comes back at the age of 35, and or when he has his awakening at the age of 35, and he returns, and they all became spiritual practitioners and monks and nuns and enlightened folks as they studied and learned from the Buddha. But I think that I look at the life of the Buddha's son, which I've never studied in depth really at all, just the relationship that it was with his father, is that there was a tremendous sense of understanding that on a spiritual journey, there are things that hold us back. Now, there are things that we can, in a very practical sense, again, that please do not leave your children. But children, I believe, are a tremendous spiritual practice for us because they do bring up the greatest sense of attachment and desire, which is for them to be healthy and happy. And we, as we grow and children grow, want, and this is, I mean, we explore this deeply in our family groups and things like that, but we want to be able to continue to cultivate a spiritual path and find peace and happiness in our life, while we're also encouraging our children to do the same. And sometimes that means that the children are going to do things differently from how we would like them. So there's a lot of challenges there as well. But that's kind of my, again, quick thoughts on the Buddha and his child. So hopefully that's helpful. And I know, Samir, you talk a lot about, your 2 kids, I think 2, being, they're great teachers for you. They are your Zen masters. They are your greatest challenges. They are your greatest joys. And I think that's incredibly important. So, and I think children can motivate and inspire us to be better people. I try not to compare the Buddha's action of leaving his wife and child to today's action of leaving a wife and child. I think the intentions were very different, and the view of samsara, the cycle of rebirth, reincarnation, things like that, were very different. Right? At that time, they all believed in a cycle of rebirth. They all believed that this was their wife and child in this lifetime, that they'd had previous lives, different partners and children, and in future lives would have different partners and children. So his intention was to free all from suffering, and that's why he went on his journey. And then he came back and taught that to them as well, with the understanding that there would be the continuous rebirth cycle, which again is very different. I don't think people walk out on their family today thinking, well, we're going to be reborn, so everything will be okay. So different approach. All right, I think we got time for one more question. Or thought before we wrap up. Good questions. And I hope you're all still pondering the words I shared with Anne Frank at the beginning about how we improve our lives. Thanks, Jeff. Great thoughts. I read Rahula eventually joined his fathers and achieved enlightenment himself. Exactly. I think I said that briefly, but absolutely that, they all, the family, became disciples of the Buddha and enlightened folks. So other thoughts or questions before we wrap up here? Like I said, I'll do one more if you want. And for me, I'll just say this, that, when I look at the life of the Buddha and these teachings, they don't all relate so directly to your life. Many of them not at all. But I think most important is to understand that the Buddha, Siddhartha Gautama, was just a human. And he had tremendous challenges and difficulties, just like we do. His difficulties were different than my difficulties, which are different than your difficulties. All of our challenges and difficulties are all relative. But the question is, how do we respond and react to each challenge that we face? I think that's really important. So, anything else before I close? All right, so we'll go ahead and we'll join palms then. We'll do a transfer of merit, and then I'll make just a few quick announcements. May any merit gained from this practice be transferred to all beings in all directions. May all be at peace. May all be free from suffering. So just a few quick announcements before you jump off. Thanks all for being here. My name is Jeff. I'm a Dharma Bum. We opened up the Dharma Bum Temple 14 years ago to introduce Buddhist practice and meditation to those who show up. So thanks for showing up. Those of us who lead, we're not monks, we're not nuns, we're not gurus, we're not masters, we're not teachers, we're not looking for students. We're just practitioners. We do our best to take our understanding of Buddhist teachings and put it into terms that hopefully make sense to those who show up. We closed about 11 months ago due to the pandemic. There's no plans to reopen yet anytime soon. So we were able to transition probably about 90% of our classes online. So every morning, Monday through Friday, we have meditation, 8 to 9. Every night we have classes going on YouTube and Zoom. We have a huge recovery group, so anyone battling addiction, drugs, alcohol, or anything for that matter. We have a family group, a teenage group, a college group. So there's always something going on. And I promise you we will have our virtual volunteer meeting soon. So thanks to all of you who are interested in that. You'll be getting an update very soon on that. And the book club also has restarted. So we're doing Pristine Mind by Chong Rinpoche. That book also available, Buddha for You. Buddha for You also closed 11 months ago. It's inside the temple. But about a month ago or so, we started the online store. So if you do need anything, books or whatever, you can go to Buddha for You and check it out there. Other than that, please be safe, wear a mask, do what you can to help others be safe. I think it's a great bodhisattva practice to stay home as much as possible and wear a mask. And Benton, I just saw your comment there. And Frank quote similar to the MLK, said if you can't do great things, then do small things in a great way. So I think that's beautiful to close on that. So thank you all. Be safe, be well, and we'll see you soon.